Hi and welcome back. This is part 4 of my tutorial, and in this part we're going to make the windowsills. First of all, let's do something else though. Select the ground floor and go to the front view, and hit O on the keyboard to center the selected object on the screen, and then go to the polygon mode and use the rectangle selection tool with only select visible elements activated to select these front polygons. Now let's split these polygons off by going to Functions, Split. I want to use these polygons as a basis for the first floor. So let's rename this new object to first floor and make it invisible in the editor and for the renderer. Now let's select the ground floor again and go back to the front view. Switch to the edge mode and use the rectangle selection tool with only select visible elements deactivated to select all of the window edges. I want to bring the windows down a bit, so let's move these edges down by -5 on the y-axis. Okay, now let's go back to the polygon mode. We're going to use the loop selection to select this polygon loop of the first window on the left. And let's split these polygons off by going to Functions, Split. I'll rename this new object to windowsills. And let's make a copy of this object and rename the copy to window frames. Let's make window frames invisible in the editor and for the renderer. Now let's select the ground floor again and go to the front view. I want to bring these bottom edges of the windows down a bit more. And I want to bring them down by the amount by which I'm going to extrude the windowsills. So let's go to the edge mode and use the rectangle selection tool to select all of these bottom edges of the windows, and let's move these down by -4 on the y-axis. Okay, now let's make the ground floor and the pillars invisible and select the windowsills. Go to the point mode and select these top points and delete them. And this will leave this single polygon. And now we're going to center the object axis on this polygon. So let's activate the object axis tool and go to the Move tool. We have to change the snap settings. The type should be Snap 3D, and we have to deselect edge and midpoint and select polygon center. And now let's move the object axis towards the windowsill until it snaps to the polygon, like this. Okay, let's go to the edge mode and select this front edge. I want to bring this forward a bit. So let's move this to -21 on the z-axis. Now let's extrude this polygon. Go to the polygon mode and then to Structure, Extrude. We're going to extrude this polygon with caps, so activate Create Caps. And we'll use an offset of -4, which is the amount by which we moved the bottom edges of the windows down. Now hit Apply. And then select all of the polygons by hitting Ctrl A on the keyboard. You'll see that these polygons are colored blue, which means that the normals are not aligned correctly. So let's go to Functions, Reverse Normals to correct this. I'm going to delete this polygon on the left and this polygon on the right of the windowsill. These sides won't be seen in the final model because they will be hidden by the ground floor walls and the pillars, so we have no use for these polygons. If you want to, you can also delete this polygon at the back of the windowsill, but I'm not going to do this because I don't want to have any big gaps in the geometry on the inside of the building. Now let's go to the edge mode and select these front edges. We'll need these edges for beveling, so let's save these edges as a selection by going to Selection, Set Selection. And now we can copy this windowsill to the other window openings. Let's make the ground floor and the pillars visible again. And then let's go to Functions, Duplicate. We'll need 6 copies, and we have to activate Movement. We're going to move each windowsill by 350 units on the x-axis. And let's deactivate rotation. And now if you hit Apply, this should copy the windowsill to the other window openings on the front. Next I want to combine these windowsills, so let's select our objects and then go to Functions, Connect. And let's delete the original window sills. I also want to combine these selection tags into a single selection tag. So let's select our new object and select all of these selection tags. And as a precaution, hit Select Edges. And this will make sure that all of the edges that are stored in these tags are made active. And now let's go to Selection, Set Selection. And this will override this first selection tag with the active selection. Now we can delete the other tags. Okay, now let's copy these window sills to the other sides of the building. We'll use the duplicate function again, so let's go to Functions, Duplicate, and this time we'll use 3 copies, and let's deactivate movement and enable rotation. And the rotation angle should be 90 degrees on the x-axis. Now hit Apply, and this will copy the window sills to the other sides of the building. I want to combine these window sills again, so let's select them and then go to Functions, Connect, and delete the original window sills. Now let's select the window sills and select the 4 selection tags. I want to combine these into a single selection tag again. Hit Select Edges to make sure that all of the edges that are stored in these selection tags are made active, and then let's go to Selection, Set Selection, and again this will override the first selection tag with the active selection. Now let's get rid of the other 3 tags. Okay, and that's it for the window sills. Let's do a quick test render to see how this looks. In the next part, we're going to move on to the window frames. So thanks for watching. Hope I'll see you then. Bye bye. Hi and welcome to part 5 of this tutorial. Now we're going to make the window frames. First of all, let's rename the selection tag of the window sills to Edges for Beveling. I forgot to do that in the last part. And also let's select the window sills, the pillars and the ground floor, and then hit Alt G on the keyboard. This will place these objects in a null object. And I'm going to rename this null object to ground floor. Let's make the other objects visible and put the first floor and the corners in another null object, and I'll rename this one to temp and make it invisible in the editor and for the renderer. Okay, now let's select our window frames and go to the Move tool and activate the Model tool. The first thing I want to do here is center the object axis on the window frame. And I'm going to use a plugin for this, and this plugin is called Axis Center. If you're working with Cinema 4D Release 10, you will find this tool in the Structure menu. Axis Center was not part of Cinema 4D in Release 9, so if you're working with Release 9, go and check out the Goodies CD that shipped with your Cinema 4D package. You will find Axis Center on that CD. We can use the default settings here, so let's just click Execute and close Axis Center again. Next I want to scale this frame on the Z-axis, and I'm using a value of 10 meters here. And also I want to bring this frame back towards the inside of the building a bit, so I'm entering +3 under Position in the field for the Z-axis and hit Apply. Now let's make the ground floor invisible in the editor and for the renderer. Next we're going to extrude this frame, so let's go to the polygon mode and then go to Structure, Extrude. We're going to extrude this frame without caps, and I'm using an offset of 4.5 for the first extrusion. Next let's do an inner extrusion, so let's go to Structure, Extrude Inner, and make sure that the maximum angle is set to 90 degrees. I'm using an offset of 2.5 for this inner extrusion. Now let's do another extrusion with an offset of 2.5, and let's do another inner extrusion with an offset of 1.5 meters, and let's do a final extrusion and use an offset of 4. Okay, so this is the shape of our frame. And now we're going to split the current selection of polygons off. So go to Functions, Split. We're going to use these polygons as a basis for the window panes. So I'll rename this object to Window Panes, and I'll put it in the temp folder for the time being. Next, I want to reduce the polygon count on the window frame. If you right-click on the window frames in the Object Manager and choose Object Information from the context menu, you will get this window. And here we get some information on the points and polygons of the selected object. You can see that the window frame now has 44 polygons. Right now we have the same amount of detail on the outside of the building that we have on the inside of the building. But since our object is intended for exterior views only, I don't want to waste any detail on the inside. The easiest way to reduce the polygon count would be to select the polygons at the back of the frame and delete them. But of course this would create gaps in the geometry on the inside of the building, and I don't really want that. So I'm going to reduce the polygon count manually. Let's go to the right view and activate the point mode. And let's use the rectangle selection tool to select this point as a reference. You can see in the coordinate manager that this point is positioned at 1 meter on the z-axis, and this is where I want the other points at the back of the window frame to be positioned as well. So let's select these points at the bottom of the window frame and these points at the top of the window frame. Now let's change the size to 0 on the z-axis and then move these points to 1 meter on the z-axis. Next we're going to optimize this object, so let's go to Selection, Deselect All, and then go to Functions, Optimize. You can see in the heads-up display that we currently have 48 points, and we can use the default settings here, so let's just click OK, and this will reduce the number of points to 40. Now let's go to the front view, switch the cameras to back, and hit O on the keyboard to center the object on the screen. And now let's go to the polygon mode and use the live selection to select these polygons. Then go to Functions, Melt. And this will produce a single polygon from the selected polygons. Now let's do this for the other sides of the window frame. So let's select these and go to Functions, Melt. Let's do the same for these polygons and for these polygons. You can see in the heads-up display that we have 4 n-gons, and if you switch to the point mode you'll see why. The points of the original polygons are not melted along with the polygons, so we have to select and delete these points manually. The optimize function won't work here. Okay, and if we render this, we have a much simpler surface at the back of the frame, and we have our detail at the front. And if you right click on the window frames in the Object Manager again and bring up the object information, you can see that the polygon count has now changed from 44 to 28, which is quite a considerable reduction considering that we will have almost 170 window frames in the scene later on. So this means that we will save something between 2,500 and 2,800 polygons. Okay, now let's make our selection for beveling. Go to the Edge mode, and I'll zoom in a little so that you can see exactly which edges I'm going to select. And let's hit Control, Shift and A on the keyboard to deselect everything. Now let's go to Selection, Loop Selection, and select these edges. You don't need to select this edge loop at the back. This will be on the inside of the building, and I don't want any detail here. Now let's go to Selection, Ring Selection, and select these edges. And let's save this selection by going to Selection, Set Selection. And let's do a quick test and bevel these edges. Go to Structure, Bevel, and I'm using an inner offset of 0.1 this time, with no subdivisions and no n-gons, and the bevel type is linear. So let's apply these settings. As with the previous objects, we're getting this shading issue if we bevel the edges. So let's select the Phong tag of the window frames and bring the Phong angle down to 44. Now if we render this, you can again see that we have these nice rounded edges with highlights, and that looks very nice. But let's undo this. We don't want all of this detail yet, so let's use Ctrl Z to go back a few steps to the unbeveled edges. And now let's copy this frame to the other window openings. I'll make the ground floor visible again. Then let's go to Functions, Duplicate, and let's use 6 copies. We need to activate movement here. Again, we're going to move each frame copy by 350 units on the x-axis, and let's deactivate rotation, then hit apply, and this will copy the window frame to the other window openings on the front of the building. Now let's select the window frames and connect these. Go to Functions, Connect. You could also right click in the Object Manager and choose Connect from the context menu, which is a bit faster actually. Now let's delete the original frames and select the new frame and its selection tags. Then select edges to make sure that all of the edges that are stored in these tags are made active. And then go to Selection, Set Selection to override the first selection tag and delete the other tags. Now let's go to Functions, Duplicate again, and this time we're going to use 3 copies, deactivate movement and enable rotation. Again, the rotation angle should be 90 degrees on the x-axis, so hit apply, and this will copy the window frames to the other sides of the building. And now again, let's select the window frames and connect them. Delete the original frames and then select the window frames and the selection tags. Select edges, go to Selection, Set Selection to override the first tag. Delete the other 3 tags. And this is it. Okay, let's do a quick test render. And you can see we have this low detail on the inside of the building and the detail we wanted on the outside of the building. And that's it for part 5. In the next bit we're going to make the window panes, which will be simple enough, and we're going to make a simple stone girder that will be positioned above each window. So thanks for watching, hope I'll see you then, and bye bye. Hi and welcome to part 6 of this tutorial. Now we're going to make the window panes and the stone girders. First of all, I'm going to rename the selection tag of the window frames to edges for beveling and put the window frames in the ground floor object. Next, let's drag this window pane out of the temp object and make the ground floor invisible. Hit O on the keyboard to center the object on the screen, and then go to Structure, Close Polygon Hole, and close this object at the back like so. Now make sure that you're in the edge mode and use the loop selection to select these edges at the front and simply delete them. And this is all we have to do for the window pane. Let's make a copy of this window pane and rename this to Window Grid. I'm going to use this as a basis for the grid detail on the window. I'll put this in the temp object. And now we can start duplicating the window pane to the other window openings. You should know the drill by now. Go to Functions, Duplicate. We need 6 copies, enable movement, and deactivate rotation. We can use the same settings that we used before. Apply. And now let's select the window panes, right click, connect them, delete these 2 objects, and duplicate this one. And this time we need 3 copies. Deactivate movement and enable rotation. Hit apply. And then select the 4 window panes, right click, connect them, and delete these 2 objects. Okay, let's put the window pane in the ground floor object. Next I want to make the stone girders. So let's select the ground floor walls, go to the polygon mode and select this polygon and split it off. Drag it out of the ground floor object and make the ground floor invisible. Go to the model tool and use axis center to center the object axis. And I also want to bring this object axis down to the bottom edge. So I'm going to activate the object axis tool and the move tool. We need to change the snap settings here to edge and midpoint. Now we can move this object axis down to the bottom edge like so. Let's go back to the model tool and make the ground floor visible again. Now I want to scale this new object. Let's rename this to stone girder. I want to scale this object on the y-axis, and since we moved the object axis down to the bottom edge, this bottom edge will always stay in place on top of the windows. So let's make this stone girder a height of 20, maybe a bit more, 25. Now let's go to the polygon mode and then go to structure, extrude, using an offset of 7 meters here. I'll make the ground floor invisible again. And select these two polygons and delete them. And go to the edge mode and select these two edges. And save these in a selection tag. I'll rename this to edges for beveling right away this time. Okay, and that's our simple stone girder. Let's make the ground floor visible again. Now we can duplicate this stone girder. Go to functions, duplicate, and make 6 copies. Enable movement, deactivate rotation, apply. And then select the stone girders, right click and connect them. And this time we need to combine the selection tags again. So select the stone girder and the selection tags. Select edges, and then go to selection, set selection, delete these tags, and let's duplicate this new object 3 times. Deactivate movement, enable rotation, and hit apply. And again we're going to select the 4 objects, right click and connect them, delete these 2, and combine the selection tags. Get rid of these 3, and let's put the stone girder in the ground floor object. Okay, this wraps it up for part 6 of my tutorial. In the next bit we're going to do the window grid. Thanks for watching, see you then, bye bye. Hi and welcome back, this is part 7 of my tutorial, and now we're going to make the window grid. So first of all I'm going to make the ground floor invisible and drag the window grid that we made before out of the temp null object. And I'm going to switch to the back view, change the cameras to front, and hit O on the keyboard to center the object on the screen. And the first thing I want to do here is select these 2 edges and apply an edge cut to them. And this time, instead of going to the menus, I'm going to right click in the viewport, which will bring up this context menu, and here you can select a number of modeling tools, and I'm going to select edge cut here, and we can accept the default settings and just make sure that create n-gons is deactivated and apply this. And I'm going to select this new edge and move it to 42.5 on the y-axis. Next I'm going to select these 3 edges and apply another edge cut, and this time I want 2 subdivisions, and I'm going to scale these new edges on the x-axis. You can scale these by any amount you like. I'm using a size of 125 here, and I'm going to select all of these new edges and bevel these. Again, right click in the viewport and select bevel from the context menu, and I'm using an offset of 3.5 here. Okay, now let's go to the polygon mode and select these polygons and delete them, Then go to the point mode, make sure that everything's deselected, and then optimize the object. And now we can go back to the polygon mode and extrude this window grid. And if you want this window grid to be flush with the window frame, what you can do is select the window frames and select one of these innermost polygons. I'm going to select this one here at the bottom, zoom in a little on this one, and if you take a look at the coordinate manager, you can see that this polygon is 2 meters on the z-axis, and this is the amount by which we have to extrude the window grid in order to make it flush with the frame. So let's select the window grid again and extrude this. Again, you can right click in the viewport and select extrude from the context menu, and let's use an offset of 2 meters here. Now I'm going to make the ground floor invisible again. Next, I want to get rid of some of the polygons on this object which won't be seen in the final model, so I'm going to select these two at the top, and this one over here, and this one over here, and this one down here, and delete them. Okay, now this is the final shape of our window grid. So now we can make our selection for beveling, and if you go to the edge mode, you can see that most of the edges that we need for beveling are already selected. But I want to show you something else, so hit Ctrl-Shift-A to deselect everything. We could also use the loop selection tool here to select the edges, but we have to activate stop at boundary edges, and now we can select the edges manually, like so. And we need some additional edges here, so I'm going to use the live selection tool to select these two edges here, and these two edges down here, and these two, and these two. Okay, and now let's save this selection, and I'm going to do a quick test and bevel these edges. Again, right click in the viewport and select bevel, and actually I want to bevel these edges by a very small amount, but since I want to show you something here, I'm going to use a slightly larger bevel. Originally I wanted to bevel these with an inner offset of 0.05, but I'm going to use a slightly larger offset here, make this 0.1 and apply. And you can see that apart from the shading, which we already know from previous objects, in this case we also have this additional new geometry, and it doesn't look very nice. And also, if you render this, you can see that we have creases which don't look very nice, and the easiest way of getting rid of the shading and the creases is by selecting the Phong tag of the window grid and bring the Phong angle down, which we've done before. And if you render this, it will look perfectly okay. So if you want to be quick about this, you might as well leave it like that. It's perfectly alright, since we're not going to use hypernopes to smooth this object. But I think we can do this a little better and improve the geometry on this. So let's go back a few steps. Just Control Z to go back to the unbeveled edges. And what I'm going to do is select additional edges for beveling. And in this case, we can either select these two edges or these two edges. And I'm going to select these two. Now let's bevel these edges again. And you can see the geometry looks much cleaner over here. And of course we still have the shading, and we still have creases here. but we can get rid of this by bringing the Phong angle down again. Okay, and if you want to be perfect, if you want to make a perfect object, what you can do is go to the point mode. I'm going to zoom in a little here and select these 2 points. Then go to structure, weld. You can see this little yellow dot here right in the middle between the 2 selected points. And if you left click in the viewport, you can weld these points together. And let's do the same thing down here. You can always switch between the last 2 tools that you used by hitting the spacebar. So hit the spacebar and this will activate the live selection tool again. Select these 2 points, hit the spacebar again, and this will activate the weld tool again, and then left click in the viewport to weld these points. And I'm going to do the same thing over here. And up here. Now if you switch to the front view and zoom in on this corner here, I'm going to switch the display to lines. You can see that welding these points has also changed the bevel. So we have the original bevel here, but it's almost disappeared here. So what we also have to do now is select our 4 new points. Go back to the front view, and we need to scale these on the y-axis. Bring these down a little, like so. And we also have to scale them on the x-axis, so move them in like this. And if you want to be totally exact about this, you could select this point as a reference, for example, copy the y position of this point, and then select these 2 points here, paste the y position, and make sure that the size of these 2 points is 0, so that they are perfectly aligned, and then hit apply. And we could do the same thing down here. Copy the y position, then select these 2 points here and paste the y position. And then select this point as a reference, copy the x position, and select these 2 points, paste the x position, and we can do the same thing here. Copy the x position again, and then select these 2 points and paste the x position. And now we have perfect bevels again, and we also have a clean mesh. Okay, you won't see any difference if you render this, but this is what you can do to make it absolutely perfect. I'm not going to use this method because I want to complete this building without beveled edges. So I'm going for the version where I select additional edges for beveling to get a mesh that looks a little nicer. And if I decide to bevel the edges later on, I can compensate for the shading and the creases by bringing the Phong angle down. So this last version that I showed you here is for those of you who want to bevel the edges right away and get a perfect object. And of course you have to do the same thing for this area over here. Okay, so now let's use Ctrl Z to go back to the unbeveled edges again. Okay, and I've already selected these 2 edges here, so now let's also select these 2 edges over here, and then make sure that your selection tag is selected in the object manager, and then save this new selection. Okay, now we can duplicate our window grid around. I'll make the ground floor visible again, and you know what to do. Go to Functions, Duplicate, and we need 6 copies. Enable movement and deactivate rotation. Apply these settings, and then select the new objects, right click, connect them, delete these two, and like before I'm going to create a single selection tag and delete these, and then go to Functions, Duplicate again, and this time we'll need 3 copies. Deactivate movement, activate rotation, and apply these settings, and again connect the new objects, delete the old ones, and create a single selection tag and get rid of these 3. Okay, this is the end of part 7 of this tutorial. In the next bit I think we're going to make the ceiling for the ground floor, and then we'll move on